Marcus sat quietly in the dining room. According to one of the armorers, when the slaves weren't fighting, they were allowed free roam of their area. Sometime in the last hour, he had stopped flinching whenever the Medusa walked past. She wasn't a real Medusa, any more than Cerberus was the actual guardian of the underworld. Across the room, the gladiator matches were being shown on a box that somehow could display the moving images in real time, but Marcus wasn't particularly interested. They all ended the same way, alien blood on the sand. He had tried to rip the collar off his neck and received a nasty shock for his efforts. Then, he tried to saw it off, but the pathetic and flimsy knife they had given him for food snapped off. And it had taken him half an hour to get the last shard of whatever material it was out from underneath the collar. Now, his eyes were staring off into space as his fingers gently played over the lightweight metal. It felt like it should be easy enough to bend. It was lighter than gold, and it should be softer. Yet it had resisted with the strength of steel when he had tried to twist it. He was feeling for a lock or a seam, something he could use. Nothing should be this perfectly put together, and yet, it felt as seamless as the doors looked. He grabbed another of the flimsy knives from the tray they had placed out for the slaves and ran the edge along the collar. The knife itself was made out of some flimsy material, too weak to hold an edge, but cast into a serrated blade. What it did have in its favor was the easily bent teeth were great for feeling for a single hairline fracture in whatever it was run over. This was the 5th or 6th time he'd tried this, each time with the same results. There was no seam he could find in the collar. No hole, no weakness he could exploit. He didn't even know how it worked, which was almost certainly a hindrance to his efforts. Finally, it snapped and a large piece lodged itself underneath the collar. To Hades with it, the Roman snarled and threw the knife away. It clattered against the floor for a moment, then sank into it as though it had never existed. Across the room, the Medusa looked over at Marcus's frustrated face and came over to him. "Hey," she said, sitting across from him. "A Medusa," Marcus said, almost sounding tired. "I sit across from a Medusa, and yet, I do not turn to stone. Truly, the barbarian that captured me has perverted the will of the gods." The Medusa cocked an eyebrow. "Are you calling me ugly?" she asked, sounding dangerous. Marcus sighed and gestured with his hands. No, you are, well, on my home." Marcus still wasn't entirely comfortable with calling it Terra or my planet. To him, it was home. And on his home was his love, Rome, the eternal city. "Where I come from, there is a tale. There was a woman, the daughter of the ancient god Phorcys in Quito. She was so beautiful that Poseidon, god of the sea, fell in love with her. He took her to a temple and lay with her. But in his haste, Poseidon took her to the temple of Athena, goddess of wisdom, and all it entails. She was so furious that she cursed the woman to have hair of snakes and a visage that would turn any mortal to stone." Marcus gestured at the twisting serpents that made up the hair of the creature sitting across from him. "Medusa," he gestured to himself. "And yet, I turn not to stone." Marcus seemed resigned to the fact that his gods held no sway in this land of heathens. "An interesting legend," the Medusa commented. "But please, I really prefer Shalia to Medusa." "Now, why were you throwing knives across the room?" Marcus shrugged. "I want the collar off. I got frustrated. And I threw the knife that is not a knife to the floor." "It's called plastic." Marcus looked at her uncomprehendingly. "The material, it's called plastic. Anything that could be a weapon, which they give us, is plastic. Plastic spoons, plastic forks, plastic knives, plastic shukushku." The Medusa blinked. "Huh. Everybody else has a word for shukushku." Marcus just looked blank. "Two sticks, you hold them in one hand and use them to pick up your food," Shalia explained. Marcus shrugged, then leaned in close. "Listen, Shalia, you wouldn't happen to know how I could get this collar off, do you?" Shalia's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Be grateful for what you have, pink skin." There are many masters not as forgiving and generous as ours. Put thoughts of escape out of your mind. Marcus spat off to the side. Now I see why you have no such collar, he said, and stood abruptly. I will not parley with one who would tell his son of Rome to resign himself to slavery. I was born a free man. I served honorably for 23 years in the legions. And I became Centurian in the first cohort. I will. Marcus's speech ended in a scream as the collar activated, sending a burst of electricity through him and bringing him to his knees. Rectic stood at the entrance to the common room, the remote to the shock collar in his hand and a mild expression of disapproval on his face. I had come to congratulate our newest member on his first victory in the arena. But I see that he requires more time before he can be considered civilized. Marcus groaned aloud, but inside, he was laughing. There was still a shard of plastic between his skin and the collar. And that was the one part of his neck that didn't hurt. Author's name and the link to original text is in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video.